Based on a true story, a woman forced to commit a crime by her captors must do whatever it takes to prove her innocence and save her daughter's life. One evening, the distraught Michelle runs out of the house carrying her bags, determined to escape a tumultuous home life. Her mother begs the teen to come back, but she continues to the road and hitchhikes for a ride out of town. 15 years later, Michelle has a successful career as a bank manager. One morning, the single mother tells her daughter, Breea, that she has plans after work so the babysitter will pick the girl up from school later. When they're about to leave, the woman runs into her brother, Dave, by the front door. The man says he talked to their mother on the phone last night, and the exasperated sister realizes he's there to convince her that it's time to repair the strained relationship. So Michelle tells Dave that she doesn't care if their mother's getting old because she never wants to speak to her again. At the bank, Michelle meets with clients Sandy and Chris, a married couple hoping to get a mortgage to purchase a house. So she and the man exchange calling cards. The man sees Breea's framed picture on the desk and asks if it's her daughter, and the woman affirms. As the bank employee hands over the paperwork for them to fill out, Chris asks if she has a husband, and Michelle says no. That evening, the woman goes on a date with Joe, and she mentions how most men usually get scared when they find out that she has a daughter. Eventually, the pair return to the house, and after she sends the babysitter home, Michelle asks her date if he wants to stay for a drink. After telling Joe to grab them some wine from the kitchen, the mother checks on the sleeping Breea and gently wakes her up. The child says she's scared of the people at the window, so the woman assures her that there's no one there and she just heard the wind blowing. Minutes later, Michelle and Joe proceed to the bedroom to make love. Unbeknownst to them, someone sitting in a car watches the house from across the street. The next day, the bank manager presents the Employee of the Month award to Walter. Then, Rose asks if she's alright, so she says she has a headache because she didn't get much sleep last night. Later, the armored truck parks by the bank, and a man sitting inside another vehicle takes note of the arrival time. Reggie, the armored truck driver, enters the establishment and playfully flirts with the two women as they go about their usual transactions. That evening, while the mother and daughter watch a movie, the phone rings. However, when Michelle answers the call, she doesn't hear anyone on the other end. Then, the woman hears a noise from the back door, and when she goes to check, she sees 3 masked men standing outside. Before the mother can run back to the living room, the intruders kick down the door and tackle her to the floor. Michelle manages to wriggle free and tries to fend off the attackers from her daughter. However, the men quickly overpower the pair and she begs them not to hurt her daughter. The woman says she can give them money if they let them go, but the intruders threaten to hurt them if she doesn't keep quiet. While the leader talks to the tied-up Michelle in the living room, his lackey takes Breea to the bedroom. The intruder asks if their house is hooked to a security system, and the distraught woman shakes her head. Then, the man begins stating specific details about her life, such as her occupation and the school her daughter goes to, revealing that this was a premeditated attack. When Michelle asks what they want from her, he says that she is gonna rob the bank for them. The mother tries to call for Breea, so the captor places duct tape over her mouth. Then, she sees the ring on his finger and realizes that the masked man is Chris, the client she met yesterday. After the woman calms down, he removes the duct tape over her mouth and takes a seat behind her. The man lifts his mask and asks how much money is in the bank, and she says somewhere between $350,000 and $400,000. However, the intruder mentions that he's been watching the establishment for 2 months and the courier arrives at the same time every morning and carries in 4 bags, so he doesn't believe the amount that she stated. Nevertheless, Michelle insists that she's telling the truth whether he believes her or not. Eventually, Chris allows the woman to untie her daughter after she promises to cooperate. Then, the crying child says she needs to go to the bathroom. In the bathroom, Michelle turns the faucet on and checks the cabinets for anything she can use. When she doesn't find anything, she tries to open the window, but Chris walks in. In the kitchen, the bank manager tells the captors that their plan won't work, so they might as well leave. However, Chris tells Bones to show her what's inside the bag, and the man takes out dynamite and a remote detonator. The furious woman calls them deranged, so the leader threatens to hit her, but she reminds him that if he bruises her, her colleagues are gonna wonder how she got it and derail their plan. Soon, the intruders allow the mother and daughter to go to sleep, but Chris sits in the corner watching them. The next day, the man forces Michelle to take a shower while he watches creepily. Later, the men strap explosives to the woman's body and explain that they can detonate it from 100 yards away. Chris adds that they're placing a microphone underneath her clothes so they can hear everything she says and make sure she doesn't alert the authorities. In the living room, Michelle sees that the men also strap dynamite onto Brea's body. Then, the leader answers a radio call from their companions outside, reminding him that they have 45 minutes before the armored truck arrives at the bank. Before leaving, the mother tells her daughter to be brave while she's gone. When they arrive at the bank, Chris reminds Michelle that he can hear everything she says. He instructs that she has 1 minute after the transaction with Reggie to bring him the bag of money. Soon, the manager enters the establishment and tells the courier that she's in a hurry, perplexing the man and Rose because they typically engage in playful banter. Outside, Chris sees Reggie and the guards leaving and deduces the transaction went by smoothly. Inside the vault, Michelle places her hand over Rose's mouth to keep quiet and shows her the microphone and explosives under her clothes. The mortified employee tries to leave the vault to alert the others, but the manager begs her not to cause a panic. Then, the woman writes that she needs help and that Brea's life is in danger. So Michelle places the money inside the bag and quietly tells Rose that no one should go inside the vault until she is left or else the captors are going to kill Breea. Soon, the manager returns to the car, puts the bag in the back seat next to Chris, and drives away from the bank. Moments later, the woman says she did everything they wanted and asks that they remove the explosives from her daughter. However, the captor reminds her that he's still in charge and gives the orders. Meanwhile, Rose locks the bank doors and tells everyone that Michelle just left with all the money in the vault. Confused, Walter says them not contacting the authorities immediately makes them accessories to the crime. The woman explains that there was dynamite strapped to the manager's body and that she claimed her daughter's life was in danger. The skeptical Walter insists they should press the alarm, but Rose begs that they wait for Michelle's call before doing anything. Concurrently, Chris tells the captive to stop the car, get out of the vehicle, and drop to her knees. He orders her to count to 50 before walking to her car, which he's gonna park several hundred feet away. After the count, the manager removes the explosives and microphone from her body and runs to the vehicle. In the bank, Walter thinks Michelle isn't going to call and they need to follow protocols, so Rose finally agrees to contact the authorities. Later, the mother arrives at the house and finds her daughter locked inside a cabinet, so she slowly removes the dynamite around the child's chest and they run to a neighbor's house to ask them to call the police. Soon, Detective Summers speaks to the manager regarding the events that transpired. Then, the cop says they're gonna place the mother and daughter in a motel while they check the house. Michelle asks if they'll be in protective custody, but the detective says they can't authorize it without risk assessment. Confused, the woman points out that they were terrorized for the past 18 hours and the men who were responsible are still at large. So the cop explains that in similar cases, the perpetrators are usually long gone at this point. Before he leaves, Detective Summers tells the woman to bring her daughter to the station tomorrow so she can give her statement. As another officer passes by, the manager asks if the paramedics are gonna check them for shock or trauma, but the cop indifferently says that he doesn't know. Later, the mother enters the house to grab some clothes, and she remembers the terrifying events from last night. In a store, people stare at Michelle and the person at the counter recognizes her from the news report on TV. In the motel room, the woman locks the door and closes the curtains. Then, she sees her crying daughter and asks why she's scared to talk. The girl leans close and whispers that she's afraid the bad men are gonna hear her, so the mother comforts her and promises to tell her a bedtime story. However, when they hear men's voices from the hallway, Breea panics, but she quickly calms down as the voices grow faint. Eventually, the girl falls asleep and the manager washes her face in the bathroom. After wiping her face with a washcloth, she sees Chris sitting in a chair, but she realizes that it was just her imagination. The distressed woman cries, and she tries to stifle her sobs with a washcloth to not wake her daughter. Then, Michelle grabs her phone and calls Dave to tell him what happened. The next day, the mother sees Breea drawing the three men standing outside their house. Suddenly, they hear a knock on the door, but their fear immediately turns to relief upon hearing Dave's voice. The man gives his sister and niece comforting hugs and asks the girl if she wants to get a milkshake. Later, the manager returns to the bank and sees the cops taking pictures and talking to the employees. Detective Summers subtly asks if she discussed the plan with Chris when he was at the bank, so the woman reiterates that she was ordered to rob the bank under duress because they threatened to detonate the explosives on her and her daughter's bodies if she refused. The cop counters that she had several opportunities to press the alarm but took the money instead, so she reasons that there was a microphone under her clothes. Michelle repeats that Brea's life was in danger, so the detective reveals that the explosives were fake. Confused, the manager says they weren't fake because they felt heavy, but the cop explains that they were just rolls of nickels painted to look like explosives. Later, the woman tells her brother that she can't go back to the bank because everybody thinks she's guilty. She says she doesn't know what to do because she can't go back to work and she doesn't want to go home. So Dave assures her that she is gonna pull through because she's always been the strong one in the family and she'll do anything to make things right for her daughter. At the police station, Detective Summers forbids the mother from sitting in on Brea's talk with the therapist. Later, the cop says one of the intruders left a fingerprint at the scene and they were able to get a match for a person named William Hastings, one of Chris's aliases. He states that the man was convicted of 8 bank robberies in Southern California, sentenced to 15 years in prison and served 5. However, Detective Summers brings up how strange it was that the captor introduced himself to the victim the day before and even left his card. He adds that even though the woman is a manager in one of the largest banks in Southern California, she only has a few $1,000s in savings. Michelle explains she has difficulty keeping money because her ex ran up a lot of debt before leaving her. The exasperated woman asks why her financial situation matters, prompting the angry cop to slam his notepad on the table and counter that it matters because she walked out of the bank with over $300,000. Again, the cop asks if she had anything to do with the crime, and the manager insists she would never allow those men to torment her child. Despite asserting her innocence, Detective Summers advises the woman to get a lawyer. Later, the therapist tells Michelle that she shouldn't bury the pain because it'll only force her to relive the traumatic experience over and over. The doctor explains that what she and her daughter went through is gonna take some time to heal and tells the woman to give her a call if she needs help. At the motel, the manager asks her brother why she needs a lawyer, so the man says cops suspect innocent people all the time and she needs to know her rights. Moments later, they turn on the news and learn that the authorities finally arrested the 3 men who held them hostage, much to the mother's relief. Soon, Michelle meets with the district attorney and learns that Sandy claimed the bank manager and Chris were romantically involved. Appalled, the woman insists that it's all a lie and Sandy sat in a car outside the house while her husband tortured them. Then, Detective Summers presents provocative pictures of the victim and says they found it in Chris's possession. The exasperated manager admits she used to work as an exotic dancer but that she quit 2 years ago before the marriage and long before she had Breea. She adds that she asked the establishment to remove her photos from the website after she left but they refused. Before she leaves, the district attorney says they only recovered $200,000 and implies that the missing $160,000 would go a long way to pay off her debts. Then, Detective Summers advises her to not leave town in case they have any further questions. In a session with a therapist, Michelle says she needs help sleeping because she still hears the intruder's voices at night. Moments later, the patient sobs because she promised her daughter that she'd protect her and give her a life that was different from her own. She laments that she tried her best to be free of her parents and to give Breea an upbringing without trauma and neglect. However, the therapist points out that she's done everything except forgive her parents and she's worried that her daughter won't forgive her. When the woman says she's gonna take Breea as far away as she can, the doctor explains that it's how she copes with all her problems, thus unknowingly giving her daughter the same life.